Thanks, Chairman. And first of all, I want to welcome all the different farming organisations in. Just take note of my questions, guys, because I have a few lined up and I just want to know your thoughts. With the new proposals on the dairy, say basically on the litrage, the 92 and the 102 and the 82, is there a fear among the dairy sector that the cow that's producing maybe less milk and not a good calf, and I'll call it out straight, the Jersey cow, is there a fear among the farming organisations that this cow would be used more, thus ensuring that we would have a lesser quality calf going out there to basically the beef sector? And what is your solution to that, to try and prevent this? Because this isn't helping in the whole situation. That's question one. In the line of slurry, I agree, first of all, and I think it was Tim that talked about it, that in relation to, there's a lot of towns has sewerage going into rivers, and I think everyone is getting blamed. I know that they're able to differentiate between human sewerage and cattle from the slab tanks. I understand that, or from cattle abroad in the field. But I just want to know, I understand with you, I agree with you 100% on that. But in the line of the grants, I think that, do you agree that there's a lot of gear out there at the moment that unfortunately farmers haven't time and haven't the tractors to drive some of it, that the likes of 80% of it is done by contractors, and they don't seem to be, there's no grant there for them at the moment to help in that situation. That's question two. Question three, explain to me your thinking. I'm looking at it here in the line of derogations. There's 123,000 farmers that has to, 125, we're now up to 1,000 or two, that has to stay by the nitrates regulations. Why are we hung up about 7 or 8 or 5,000 farmers? And like I heard it said earlier on, it could be the difference that they'd have to reduce or do X, Y, and Z. There's a lot of farmers have to farm within the rules that's there at the moment, not look for a derogation and still survive. And I'm just curious to know, why is there such a hang up about them 5, 6, 7, 8,000 farmers? In the line of slurry, I think, and this is coming from a farmer, I think we have to admit that stuff has gone on down through the last number of years that isn't helpful to the farming sector. There has been land rented in parts of the country, especially mountains, that's basically covered in people. And there's no one, let no one go cotton themselves that we're going to haul slurry 100 miles. And I certainly never spread slurry for anyone up on top of Bin Bulban. So what's your solution to that, guys? There's a 30 kilometre thing being put in at the moment. What's your solution to that is what I'm interested to know. Do you think, when you look at the reports that has come out on water quality, that it should be regionalised? I looked at the west and the northwest and it was pretty good. Do you think that it should be regionalised in the line of, say, the closed season? If you have average land like in Leitrim, or look, I have it myself where I'm from, I'm not any different to anyone else, but where there's poorish land, if you had a wettish year, you're in trouble. Should there not be some thing there for the people at the slurry? In relation to I think, Joe, it was am I right in saying it's the Department of Environment that has put in a submission to the Department of Agriculture in relation to all water courses? And I think that you touched on it there, and I know a bit about this. 80% west of the River Corrib in Galway is designated. If you have to go fencing water courses there, it'll cost you about 7 or 8,000 with every environmentalist blocking you that you cannot put up a fence, because they'll tell you to actually stop farmers from farming. And I'm just wondering your thoughts on that. And in the line of the and I was interested in listening to you there about the slurry storage. I think there's 40% are under pressure at the moment with slurry storage around the country. and that could be less or could be more. My understanding is you won't get a grant if you're basically if you're over the threshold at the moment. Is it not a good idea from the department, in fairness, as much as we kick them, that they'll bring in a grant, that you can still get a grant for, by the way, soiled water or whatever water, or say in the yard where the water runs off where cattle will be walking? Is it not a sort of a back door for you to be able to solve this problem in getting a grant under, say, for the side water? And look at, you can put. I actually looked at comments during the week, and I want to know your thoughts on this. That it was stated that it doesn't have to be separated if you have enough of area to cover it. So them are the questions. And in relation to anaerobic digesters, yes, everyone is in favour of them, but I do think, guys, and correct me if I'm wrong, that to bring it to pellet form, at the moment, it needs some bit of an incentive, or it needs some bit of a financial help, because it's not cost efficient. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Fitzmaurice. A lot of questions there. Mr. Conlan.
Thanks, Deputy, and you're right, a lot of questions there, and I'll go through them as fast as I can. And Deputy, your first question there around the banned excretion rates, and will it force farmers more to, Jersey cow, the cross cow? And look, I'm not going to. That's a decision for farmers themselves. Whatever type of animals a farmer wants to farm, I would say we leave that decision to themselves. But like, we have a proposal in the CAP reform, around calves from the dairy herd. It's a dairy beef scheme. And there is a proposal there, if farmers were genotyping their animals, that there would be a payment around that. So that's an area we're looking at there. And you're right, look, around the water treatment plants, and look, that is a concern. I think I said that in my opening remarks, that what we would like to see here is, like, there is more monitoring points on rivers, and this water is being monitored by the EPA. And what we will be asking is, that those results will be put on the table, because, Deputy, we are not, anything the farmers can do, that will help with water quality, and we all want to farm in an environmentally sustainable way. We are up for this challenge, and we want to see the results. And I think it's important that we're not held in the dark. Like, it's fine for one side being able to see what's going on out there, the impact coming from the large towns and the impact further downstream. That's critical, that information is available to us. And you make a valuable point around the contractors. Approximately 80% of the work is done by contractors. And again, that comes back to condensing the close period, put more pressure on the contractor, the farmer being able to get the guy at the proper time. And you speak around grants there for contractors, but most contractors are farmers anyway. So I think they would be covered there. And you spoke there about you're right, there is about 7,300 farmers in derogation. And look, those are farmers that have taken on a business, that have driven that business, invested substantial amounts of their own money in that business. And that opportunity is there for any farmer, if they so wish to go that road, or stay within the 170. That's the other option. And I suppose, look, in parts of the country, and where a lot of dairy farms were developed, the availability of land is a factor around that. And that goes back again to the excretion rates that we're talking about now. Like, if there is changes there, that is going to put pressure on the availability of land again, thus another cost for farmers. So all of this changes. If it's not going to bring in an environmental improvement, it will impact on the cost for farmers as well. And you spoke there about the 30 kilometre. And look, we need to get practical here. You take a sheep farmer, and take a sheep farmer in your own part of the country. Like, 30 kilometres is nothing. I was in Donegal recently myself. I know you travel up and down counties like that. And it's farmers would have small pieces of land in different areas, albeit, family circumstances over the years, they would have inherited land or whatever. And I see this as being totally impractical. And the other area you spoke about there, regionalising the dates. Already, sure, we have longer close periods in different areas of the country. That is there already. And you spoke then about grants for slurry stores, and I think your point is if we were to get the grant for soil water. But look, I think we need to be careful here. There is a system there in place already to deal with soil water. There's a minute amount of nutrients in that soil water, and if that is dispersed in a proper fashion on farmland, we don't need to be storing. We don't need extra storage there, because you're right. That's only again putting more costs on farmers. And your final point there around anaerobic digestion. Without proper funding, without a proper feed-in tariff, look, it's not going to work. And it's back to Senator Byland's point earlier on. I believe we do need to look at this as an alternative source of income for farmers.
Cormac.
Yeah, thanks, Deputy Fitzmaurice, for the questions. And you talk about the dairy breed and the bending, and we have huge concerns about that. And I alluded to it earlier in my opener. We need to see a more industry consultation and discussion on it, because certainly, and we acknowledge the department's role, in listening to our dairy calf to beef proposal last year, albeit a pilot programme. It's something that can certainly be built upon in the CAP, negotiations that'll happen within this country or ongoing in this country at this point in time, because we believe that, we can improve the beef going from the dairy herd and have them fit for purpose within the beef herd. But that's not the question you asked. So I would share your concerns, Deputy Fitzmaurice, as regards the bending and the potential to go in a wrong direction from an animal welfare point of view, ultimately going forward. As regards the less grant aid available for contractors, Tim alluded to there, the vast majority of contractors would be eligible because they'd have a herd number, but I suppose the issue is that they're not eligible to receive the VAT back if they obtain the grant. And look, that's something that certainly I'm sure the contractors associations are well able to battle and highlight. But obviously we need to get as many of those machines as we possibly can on the ground, because to have them available, in particular to have them available, I suppose, when the close period opens, if our farmers, is absolutely critical. And I suppose that's why we can't just go straight from 170 down to 100 kgs of a mandatory slurry spreading through the low emission slurry spreading, because those machines won't be on the ground, and we believe that should be done in a staged process. As regards, the 7,000 or 8,000 dairy farmers in derogation, I suppose they contribute hugely to the dairy industry, and we know what that has done for the economy through the recessions of 08 and 09, and indeed post the abolition of quotas. It's huge in our exports, and certainly that 7,000 or 8,000 dairy farmers, derogation is hugely important to them, hugely important to our dairy processors and to rural employment. And the spin-off in the rural economies cannot be overestimated. As regards the water quality or the water slurry storage, and 40% of farmers struggling, as you described it, to have sufficient slurry storage. I suppose the issue that I have huge concern about out there now, when I look at the proposals as they come forward, is that farmers would have to be compliant in order to qualify for the soil water from a slurry perspective. So, I think it's necessary that by whatever means we put the infrastructure on farms that facilitates nobody needing to go out unless they during the close period. I suppose the anaerobic digesters, I'd agree with you, and I suppose the issue there is to get it to pellet form, and I know that this committee has done some work on that and listened to various different proposals, but that the reality is that needs to be funded or subsidised, certainly initially, and hopefully that over a period of time that quantity would deliver it to be economically sustainable. Now, I know my colleague John Enright is anxious to come in there and provide some clarity as well.
Thanks,
Mr. Chairperson. I suppose just on the derogation, I would be concerned that that there's a incorrect interpretation of farmers who are farming under a derogation. The facts are that farmers farming under derogation are probably the best users of nutrients in this country from the point of view of fertilisers in terms of lime. They're very technically efficient. They're very good facilities. They're the most inspected farmers out there. And, there is always this impression that if I'm a derogation farmer, that I'm a large farmer. We'd have a huge amount of members out there making 40 cows, 60 cows, 70 cows, who are derogation farmers. They're full-time family farms who need derogation to be economically viable. And, if we lost that derogation tomorrow morning, their economic viability would be seriously threatened. And I think it's hugely important to say that the science shows that I can farm environmentally, sustainably under a derogation conditions. I think that's hugely important, and we shouldn't forget that. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Keane.
Thanks, Chairman, and thanks, Deputy Fitzmaurice, for your questions. I suppose the first one around the fear among the dairy sector in terms of the selection of cow type and size. I suppose an individual farmer's selection on what their cow type is for their own decision, but on a greater side of things, our members are expressing to us that the suggested proposals here in terms of the banding are going to result in farmers choosing cows who are producing less, and it may not necessarily be compatible with the dual dairy beef system that we see in a lot of herds across the country right now. We've seen the use of the DBI index over the past number of years to improve the dairy bull calf value. We've seen in recent weeks, we've seen the Moore Park announcement about the development of the sex semen lab, which we welcome, but which we've called for a long number of years. So our fear is that with the proposals here, that the issues around the dual purpose cow, the issues that have been raised in some circles around the welfare and providing a viable outcome and a viable income from the beef side of things from the dairy herd, is something which is of huge concern under these proposals, because there is a certain type of cow that is being unduly penalised. I suppose your question around the use of equipment on farm, and I think both Tim and Pat have addressed in terms of the equipment piece, but I think the larger piece to consider with that is we are, I suppose, encouraging, and the proposals are that the enforcement will be that more farmers will have to spread slurry through the less methods. The equipment is one side of things, but you also need equipment to power the slurry tankers, which are used across the country, and your 135 that you use for scraping the yard is not going to be able to drive a 2,500 galley slurry tank for low emission slurry spreading, and the considerable costs that there are associated with that as well. So simply to say that if we get enough grant aid support for low emission slurry, that everything is just going to be fine and rosy is not really practical, and is not going to reflect the realities of what's going to go on the ground. Also from contractors that we've heard from local here back around home from myself and other young farmers, there is phenomenal amount of pressure on contractors in the weeks leading up to and the weeks after closed periods are opened and closed. So with that in mind, if you're greatening and lengthening the closed period, that's going to even create a more increased amount of pressure on those individuals and on the amount of slurry that's going to be put out in a short space of time. I think your question in terms of the land rented, within our organisation, we have a large proportion of young farmers who are farming at their home blocks, whether that be on dairy enterprises or other livestock enterprises. And given that they are in a high competitive area for land, that they have had to travel significant distances, whether that be over 30 kilometres for outblocks to rear young stock, to grow silage, and other means to support their businesses. So I'm not sure that the spreading of slurry on Belbulben is reflective of what's going on right across the country. But I think from a young farmer's point of view, in areas which are heavily stocked and which are moving forward and who are young farmers who are trying to progress their access to land, as I touched on.
My question is, John, does anyone bring slurry 100 miles? Like, we have to be a bit common sense about this.
The proposal, Deputy, is around whether or not the land that's greater than 30 kilometres away.
Yeah, I'm saying, does anyone bring it 100 miles? That's what I'm asking, a straight question. In fairness, like, that's what I'm referring to.
From our farmers' point of view, it's the slurry is one piece, but it's the inclusion in the overall farm stocking rate is a hugely important piece as well. That can't be forgotten, because you're going to have to rear your young stock, and if that's not being included in your overall on-farm stocking rate, it increases your milking farm stocking rate, which will reduce the amount of stock which you can carry, which will have an undue effect on the profitability of your enterprise. So there are two elements to that too. In terms of the grant aid support, definitely welcome in terms of grant aid support for soil water storage and for slurry storage. I think the issue is in terms of the regulations. When the regulations are imposed, those who fall outside the current limits, or who are under pressure for storage right now, will not be able to avail of grant aid support. So you have a significant amount of farmers who at the time will not be able to avail of grant aid support given their current circumstances. So they'll have to become compliant in order to avail of that grant aid support, and that's going to put undue pressure on them, and I think it will alienate them and leave them at a significant disadvantage. And from your anaerobic digester question, we touched on it a small bit earlier, but we will be hugely in favour of the development of that. We mentioned around the feed-in tariff and the need for improvements there around the planning as well, and also the issue that you brought up around pelleting as well, also needs considerable support in order for it to make it viable. Thank you, Chairman.
Mr. Condon.
Thanks, Chairman. In answer to Deputy Fitzmaurice's question on where this consultation process is emanating from, it's from the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage, and the person involved is Jim Call of the Water Advisory Unit. On the second point, where he spoke about 80% west of Pacific River is a Natura area, a possible solution would be that in the old review there was a graduation of levels where you had more intense, less intense, and they all had a kg of nitrates involved in them, down to extensive farming, which I think was around 140 kg. If there was a conservation grazing category at less than 100 kgs, that under 100 kgs, this would cover a lot of those areas, and this would be a category that would exclude those areas from those fencing requirements, those legal, where you'd have to go in to apply for planning permission on those Natura areas. That's one possible solution. This review itself is a two-stage process. This is the second stage. The first stage recommended that the water courses, the fencing of water courses, be extended to all farms. It's at point 4.4 on the document. So this is the last stage. If that goes through, if that recommendation goes through, if it's not pushed back by this committee, it's going to cause serious difficulties for farmers in those areas to continue farming, especially with bovines. That's my contribution. Thank you.